working on my C4 automatic transmission, and I've already dropped the pan and fluid and peeled the gasket off, which just fell off pretty easy. It was a cork gasket. I did get a new kit that includes a rubber gasket and a new filter. And then I will also, on the side where the selector shaft is, I've got a seal that's leaking there, so I'll need to replace that seal and then get everything put back together. I'll measure how much fluid came out, and that's exactly how much I'll put back in. And I've addressed the shift linkage leak on the side. I removed the linkage, and in the end of that shaft, shift shaft, there's an O-ring, and I just used a little pick, picked it out, and put a new O-ring in, and hopefully that stops the leak. Otherwise, I've got to drop the valve body, and there's a seal inside that I need to replace, but I think it might have just been that little O-ring. Another little surprise, in this little hole right here, as I dropped the filter down, out came a spring. So I did a little research and found out that it's a pressure limit valve, and it's important. It helps control the line pressure in your transmission. These are the two pieces that came popping out of there to control the line pressure, and this piece goes up into that hole first, and then the spring goes next. The filter has a little tab on it that actually holds it in place. It appears that there's a roll pin missing, which is why it probably flew out of there. So I'll see if I can't find a roll pin to put it back in. We'll get the filter on and pan back on and get this thing filled back up with fluid so I can drive it. A new filter in place, and with that spring and valve pin goes right there. Valve pin in first, then the spring on top, and this little tab on the filter actually holds it in place, so I did not find a roll pin to put in there. Hopefully it works fine, and I have good line pressure in my transmission. I'm going to go ahead and get my surfaces all cleaned up and get a new gasket on there and get my pan back on. Have the drain pan and gasket on my workbench, and I went ahead and applied a thin coat of Permatex gasket sealant on the pan and on the gasket, and you got to let it set up for just a little bit until it gets tacky, and then we'll put the two together and put the pan back on. I've had good success using this gasket sealant, or Edelbrock makes a gasket cinch product. Just helps you get the gasket on and hold it in place while you're putting things back together. Okay, pan's back on. I like to put the bolts in finger tight first, get them all lined up, and then torque them down to 15 foot-pounds, doing a back and forth pattern or star pattern to get the pan evenly seated. And I probably should have painted this pan, but didn't. I had a small problem when I went to start the Bronco. I had nothing from the ignition switch, and immediately I thought, it's probably this neutral safety switch that's attached right here to the side of the transmission. It slips over the selector shaft, and sure enough, that was it. I looked in my Bronco manual, and I'm glad I had a manual, because I probably wouldn't have figured this out. I thought it was the solenoid. I thought I had other issues, but anyway, to adjust this neutral safety switch, you have to put the selector in neutral, and then you have to loosen the two bolts that hold this switch on, And then there's a small hole on top. And you actually have to twist this thing back and forth and stick, well, I used a drill bit, appropriate size drill bit. And the drill bit lines everything up. And once you have the drill bit slid completely through the switch, you actually tighten these two bolts back up into place and then reattach the nut on the outside. And I thought, okay, we'll give it a try. And sure enough, it just turned right over and started right up. So I didn't know that the neutral safety switch had to be set. But that's how you go about doing it, with a pin or a drill bit, and line everything up and reattach it. Wanted to add that to my transmission woes. As you can see, I put a little O-ring also on the end of this shaft, and it's not leaking, so I'm hoping that was it, as far as a small leak from there. I'm going to go ahead and take the Bronco out for a drive. So stay tuned for one of my next videos on that. Well, thanks again for watching my short video on my C4 automatic transmission fluid change. And I really appreciate you watching. And please like or subscribe if you want to. And stay tuned. I'm going to take this thing out on the road. And as I mentioned before, I wanted to drop all my fluids and do a little inspection of wheel bearings and brakes. And I'm actually putting the drive shafts back on, and I'm gonna get this thing out on the road and see what else it needs. Kate, are you working on Pop's Bronco?
This is the ice cream truck.
Huh?
Pops,
Are you working on Pop's Bronco?
This is the ice cream.
The ice cream truck? Oh no.
Could you walk behind the back so you can have one double ice?
One double ice cream, please.
Okay.